people might not realize how tightly land and water are really linked. Ruth Carmichael. I'm a senior marine scientist at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab and associate professor of marine sciences at the University of South Alabama. For me, conservation has to do with preserving either rare lineages or rare species, and typically this is for the goal of protecting biodiversity. Pollution is anything that we might do that alters a system, either by putting something into that system that wasn't there before, or doing something to alter the environment, alter the food resources or habitat to change it from what is normally the situation. So typically when we do something to alter a system or change the system, we may be affecting the habitat in terms of its ability to provide shelter or ability to provide food resources, and that can ultimately result in the loss of species or species extinctions. Problems that we face with conservation really is twofold. First of all, identifying what the problems are, what are the primary direct or indirect threats to biodiversity, and then ultimately figuring out how to manage them. In fact, one of the most important sources of pollution to the ocean has to do with our proximity to land, because everything that starts out on land ultimately can be washed into or end up in the ocean. So for example, someone who throws a water bottle out their car window on land, that water bottle can ultimately make its way into the ocean. So there's some very important land-water links, and land can be one of the primary sources of pollution to the ocean. Until recent years, I think it's arguable that human nutrient loading, so things like excess nitrogen loading, things that were otherwise natural in the system, have been a major source of pollution to coastal ecosystems. And that's caused problems like eutrophication, that's caused anoxia or hypoxia, loss of oxygen in ocean environments. And that's largely associated with excess urbanization or too much building and too much wastewater going into coastal waters. I think in the near future, though, we're going to see a shift from things like impervious surfaces and urbanization affecting coastal waters to things like climate change and ocean acidification being the more acute factors affecting coastal resources. First of all, we have to think about fish as part of the overall ecosystem, so that it's not just about fish that we eat, but it's about how those fish contribute to the overall function of an ocean system. But then, of course, most of us do enjoy our seafood and love to eat fisheries, and so we want to make sure that there are fishery species there for the future. So management of fisheries is a really important concept in conservation because it helps us to ensure sustainability. It allows us to make sure that we have a balance between harvest and other factors that are affecting fish abundance or diversity, and what we might need for future human resource use, for example. Management of fisheries is important to allow us to strike that balance, and that can mean many different things in different countries because they have different types of fisheries, and actually how they fish or the types of threats to the fishery may be very different. So the Deepwater Horizon oil disaster was obviously a major oil spill of enormous magnitude. We don't really know, unfortunately, how this spill has affected the Gulf of Mexico. That's a subject of a lot of current ongoing study, and different researchers are studying different effects. Some people are working specifically on the open ocean system, on physical processes and how the oil moved and what its fate ultimately was in the system. And there are others of us who are really focused on the ecology and understanding how the oil may have affected the animals, either directly through immediate toxic effects or indirectly through, say, consumption of oil-derived substances and other factors like that. What makes this oil spill unique is that it's really different in terms of how it happened compared to other oil spills. So for example, the Exxon Valdez, we saw tremendous amounts of oil that actually covered animals and covered the shoreline. And we didn't see that in large part because of the dispersant that was also sprayed on the surface of the oil. And so that changed the dynamics between the ocean water and the oil in ways that we don't fully even still understand. And we know from experiences from previous oil spills, such as the Exxon Valdez, that even a decade or more after the spill, we're still seeing some effects and we're still seeing patterns of change in the system. And so I think that we can certainly be looking on a decadal scale for really beginning to fully understand the effects of this spill. But now we're already looking at 5 to 6 years following the spill, and we don't feel like we have a really good handle on what all the long-term effects are going to be. So the short answer is, I don't think we know yet. firm believer that people don't intend to engage in activities or pollution that would hurt the environment or hurt living resources. And I think one of the greatest things that we can do is simply educate the public and allow that to, in many ways, be a self-solving situation. So when people learn about the value of resources and learn about the effects of pollution and things that they can do to avoid polluting the environment and to support conservation, that they will voluntarily do that. So one of the components of the C-Lab that's part of our education program is our Discovery Hall programs. And that involves having classes for students, but it also involves things like our public estuarium, which is where we are today, which is an opportunity for us to teach about our local environment and put together some of the information about the research that our scientists do and how that relates to the local environment. So it's one of the few places that you can come. It's essentially an aquarium, but it's specifically designed to educate about our local living resources. So as part of our education programs, we also do have folks go out on research vessels, and we have vessels that are specifically designed for doing the different types of research that we conduct here at the lab, but also that are specifically designed to act as floating classrooms to help get living resources into the hands of people out actually on the boat. So to bring the students into the environment and teach them about the resources.
And so this guy is a guy, and even from birth, you can tell it's a boy. All right? Unlike all the other fish, we have no idea. Is this a boy or is this a girl? No clue until you cut it open.
So we actually conduct a wide variety of research. A lot of it is centered here and certainly has applications here on the northern Gulf of Mexico, but we also do have researchers that are engaged in work all across the globe. So work from Antarctica to the Caribbean. We do everything from basic oceanography and ecology to understanding how ecosystems function, doing marine fisheries and also marine mammals work, even microbial ecology and understanding how the individual little phytoplankton in the water grow and live. So our hope is that by better understanding our living environment, we also not only get basic information to support our core research questions, but we also gather information that basically helps us understand how animals respond to changes. And often those changes are related to human activities or pollution. And so it tells us a little bit about how animals might respond to factors that change their environment, affect their environment, maybe potentially harm them, and allow us to know something about their resiliency and how we might do things to protect their environment, protect their resources, and ultimately conserve those species. One of the interesting things that we're hearing about all the time are new ways to capture debris before it goes from land into water. Some of the new ways in which people have been developing unique products coming out of disasters like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill that help us better capture those pollutants and potentially manage them in the environment. Some of the other things that we also have heard about in recent years are things like ecosystem-based management or marine protected areas and adaptive management, which means that we're not trying to just manage individual species and individual habitats, but we're looking at the broader connectivity among species and among habitats and understanding how it all fits together to function as a unit. And by thinking on that larger scale, we're actually able to do more to help better conserve our environment and better conserve species.